It seriously amazes me how these grading companies can keep sort of getting away with these kinds of errors, these kinds of mistakes, while still charging the prices they're charging us as customers, right? It's honestly mind-boggling. Hey everyone, danthecardman back again. Welcome to another video. Very glad to have you here. And I'm really excited to talk to you about this topic today because it's something that's been on my mind for many weeks. I've mentioned this quite a lot in recent videos, but I'm finally getting around to doing it just because so many things came up over the last couple of weeks in terms of things I needed to comment on that were happening within the hobby, that this video kept getting pushed back. And that is essentially me talking you through why grading companies need to do a better job when it comes to providing us as value, or providing value to us as customers, I should say, because they're not doing a very good job at the moment. I think too many people are sort of cutting them some slack when they should be drilling down further on them, because there is so much money invested in the hobby these days that these kinds of mistakes are inexcusable. All right. And when I talk about these kinds of errors, I'm probably going to say PSA a lot, but when I say PSA, I mean the grading industry as a whole, right? Because these errors I'm about to talk to you about have happened at PSA, they've happened at BGS, they've happened at HGA, they've happened at CGC and CSG. I haven't seen too much stuff out of SGC, one or two errors, but they're definitely way less than the rest of them. But this is pretty pervasive within the grading industry as a whole, right? And when I talk to these kinds of errors, I'm going to show some things on my screen, but then also talk to a few points as well, maybe do some pop-ups and stuff, but we'll see. So when I talk about these kinds of errors, it's things like these companies grading fake cards, right? And this is always a tough one, right? Because some fakes are really good in that they can be missed, right? But when you're talking about grading companies, we're talking about the money that they're charging. They shouldn't be making those kinds of mistakes, right? Especially so when you see so many of these fake cards get slabbed and then they're posted on Instagram, and then collectors can immediately tell that a card is fake. Like there was a recent one with PSA with a Top Sun Charizard where just by looking at it for 2 seconds, someone like Rattle Pokemon could tell it was fake, yet the person who had it in hand couldn't tell that, right? So that stuff continues to happen. It's amazing. It amazes me, sorry, I should say, that they can't pick up those kinds of things. They're constantly making mistakes when it comes to trim cards. They're even missing things like altered and patch swapped cards, which is crazy to me, especially when most of those are often serial numbered, right? They're numbered. So I'm surprised they don't have a control in place that helps them check whether a card has been graded before in that number, or whether that number exists on internet. Just quickly do a Google for that card, you might see it, right? I'm surprised they're not doing that check, because it happens so often that it implies that they're not. There's also plenty of times now where you're seeing cards with the wrong label on them, which is crazy. Cards with the wrong grade on them, the wrong card and the wrong slab, right? The label being misspelt or missing off a key element, right? I saw a video the other day where somebody got I think it was a Blastoise back. I think it was Card Collector 2. Got a Blastoise back, first edition, and it was a shadowless, but didn't mention that it was a shadowless. So it's like, what are you guys doing? How much does it cost to grade that card? You make that kind of mistake, right? It's mental. But then also getting cards back to front, upside down in the slab. It's just mind-boggling. So I'm going to quickly share a few things with you, just to quickly show you some of these points that I'm talking about, right? To show that they do actually exist. I've cherry-picked a few, but this has happened countless times over the last 18 to 24 months. You can see here, Michael Jordan rookie card. I've touched on this in a weekly news video. It's upside down. Like, what the heck? How does that get missed? Someone paid how much to get this card graded? $150, $200 plus? Mental. PSA make this mistake too, and they do an upcharge on top of that. So it's like, what are you doing? What are you paying for? You're seeing stuff like this, right, where you'll see these graders. This person sent in about $2,500 USD worth of cards. They thought one of them may have been trimmed, which may be the case. But what often these graders do is, when one card is trimmed, they don't get comfort over the rest. They think the rest might be trimmed as well. So they'll basically send everything back like this to the customer, saying we can't grade it because it's trimmed, evidence trim, right? But they still charge the customer. And it's like, what are you doing? And there's other things like this where you have a card graded as a 10 with a damage to the corner, which very clearly happened while it was at PSA. Or it happened at PSA and they still slabbed it as a 10. It's like, again, what are you doing, right? Where's the value you're creating? And then you're seeing stuff like this, which Wax Museum Podcast talks about all the time, where you've had this one card patch swapped twice, which is beyond mental, and then it's graded. Albeit in this instance, it says authentic altered, right? There's other instances of this where it shows that it was still graded and missed, but it's just mental. It shouldn't be touched at all, right? I just don't understand how things like this can get missed. And it doesn't make sense when you're charging the kind of money you're charging. And the reason why I want to talk about this is because some of those things will be known to you, right? You'll be like, yeah, I already know about that. What's your point? The thing is, and what a lot of people do when they see stuff like this, they'll be like, okay, well, PSA is now grading however many cards a day, right? 100,000 cards a day, whatever it is. Maybe it's more. I forget off the top of my head. So when you're increasing the volume, the error rate's going to increase with that volume, right? Which is fine to an extent. But what these issues have shown to me over the last few months is that the policies and processes that they have in place are not sufficient enough to try and mitigate against these kinds of errors, right? And That's a lot of jargon that I've just mentioned there, but in my line of work, I work in external audit. I audit the big banks around the world. I audit the large insurance companies, and a key part of my role is to look at these processes and make sure, or not make sure, I should say, ensure that the business has appropriate controls. And when I say controls, I mean like reviews and rules in place to make sure mistakes don't happen, to make sure they have those in place, right? To make sure the process runs smoothly, because if those things work, it should capture the errors. And what's clearly happening out at PSA, albeit it's a very different industry to financial services because you're dealing with actual products, it's still relevant, right? And it just shows to me that the mistakes they're making are so basic that what they have in place is not strong enough to mitigate against these kinds of things, okay? And that might be well and good when it costs $10 to send in a card, but now when it's costing you $100 minimum to send the PSA, or the $50 option they have now, or you send in a $300 card, or sorry, a $300 service, when they upcharge you because you have to pay another couple grand now because it's an expensive card. It's like, when you're charging that kind of money and you're still making these kinds of mistakes, it's completely unacceptable. And there is so much money in the industry these days. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry, like I've touched on many times in my recent videos. That sort of stuff is completely unacceptable. You cannot have a pillar, which is what these grading companies are. And you might not see them as that, but they're essentially like a pillar within the industry, right? They should be seen similar to how rating agencies are seen within the bond market, right? Within the share market. They determine how something should be rated. That you get comfort from them because they're an ethical and robust organization. So you get the value, you trust what they're saying, right? Even though if you know your history with regards to how rating agencies sort of stuffed up with the GFC, you may not necessarily trust them, but that's sort of what they're there to do, right? They're there to provide comfort to the market. That's what PSA is there to do at the end of the day. That's what BGS is there to do. It's what all these grading companies are there to do. They're there to provide comfort to you as a customer within the market that what you've got in your hand is complete, it's accurate, and it's free from error. So when they start making these kinds of mistakes, it starts to question all the good things they've done in the past as well. You might have a PSA 10, but because PSA keeps making all these mistakes, that PSA 10 might have some question marks on it now. So how do you as a collector get value to know that what you have is actually accurate? How do you know it's not fake? How do you know it hasn't been altered? There's so many questions that start getting raised with this sort of stuff. And the reason why I want to keep flagging this with you all is that they are meant to be a pillar to this industry. They are meant to be there to provide comfort to the card grading community, the card grading hobby, the card investing community, right? As the hobby continues to expand and start generating additional avenues of wealth for people, right? People want to start investing and things like that. As that starts to increase and increase and increase, more focus has to be placed on these grading companies to do better. They need to be doing better. What they're doing right now is unacceptable. I think like the long story short, right, is they've basically gone from being a hobby, like something that enthusiasts within the hobby will use, right? They want to pay $10 to get a card graded. Cool. Okay. So they've gone with that mindset. It's only a $10 service. Like, who cares? Like, we're going to take it serious, but if mistakes happen. It only costs $10 and that card might only be worth a couple $100. Who cares? Like, and that's maybe not a good mindset to have, but that's sort of where they may have been in the past. So what sort of happened? They had that mindset, and as these businesses started getting more cards coming in, cards started becoming more valuable, they've sort of kept that mindset. They haven't improved their level of risk appetite to match the level of funding that they're taking in from you as a customer. You're paying all this money now, and it's like you're paying, like, if you think of it, an easy way to think of it would be like, let's say the level down here is their level of risk and what they're willing to do and how they treat the process, but then the amount you're paying is down here, right? So it's sort of on par. And if this is the money you're paying and this is the risk, what's sort of happened is as the hobby's got more intense and more money started coming in, they've started charging more and more and more and more, but they've kept the risk appetite down here. So they're charging all this extra money, but they're keeping you at the bottom, right, in terms of what the value they're trying to bring to the hobby. And I know I'm rambling now, but you sort of get the idea. It's completely unacceptable. And you see these kinds of issues out of BBC as well. I've touched on that in recent videos. I might do a pop-up on the screen. Like, you see all these things happening, and it's like, what value are you actually bringing to the hobby? You're there to bring value. You're there to bring comfort to us as collectors, as investors. Yes, it's cool to have a card slab to sit on your shelf. You're a collector, you want to preserve it. That element's fine. But when you're starting to charge the money that you're charging, making these kinds of mistakes consistently, right? It's not just one-off occurrences. It's pervasive throughout their whole process. It's not just on the side of poor grades, right, where they're grading things incorrectly. They're not just labeling things incorrectly. They're also sending things to wrong customers, right? It's happening at every step within key processes at every single grader. It just talks to a lack of risk appetite across the whole business that doesn't seem to be strong enough, right? It's definitely not strong enough. So I'm really keen to get your thoughts down in the comments below. I know I rambled a little bit there, but I hope I conveyed how serious this sort of stuff is, right? Because it's completely unacceptable right now. There's so much money in the hobby that you could almost see it be regulated at some point in the future, as it's almost turning into a tangible investment opportunity for people, right? And when you're having that kind of money invested, do you really think like the tax department and things like that all around the world are going to sort of sit by and let this stuff continue to go untaxed? I know they do try and tax you here and there now, But you sort of get the idea, right? They're seeing all this money come through. You really think that people aren't going to try and start regulating that moving forward? It's disappointing because it's a card collecting, it's a hobby, right? So why should that happen? But when you're seeing the amount of money that's currently being invested, when you're seeing how these grading companies are treating it, right, where they're not taking it, or what appears to be, as seriously as they should, they're not investing as much money into their own internal policies to try and make the processes more robust as they should. So this stuff is just going to keep happening. So when that stuff does happen, do you really think nobody's going to step in and try and regulate? There's so much room for error right now on a manipulation side of things. People can collude and things like that. It's just, I don't want to go into too much detail with regard to that, but you sort of get the idea, right? It's just open. It's open for collusion. It's open for people to take advantage. It's open for error, and it just doesn't create enough value for us as collectors. So I'm really keen to get your thoughts down in the comments below. A huge rant just there. Hopefully you took some information out of that. I just wanted to share my thoughts because it's, in my opinion, it's very disappointing, and they need to be doing better because it's completely unacceptable. And when I'm looking at it through my external auditor lens, I'm seeing all these gaps that maybe some of you don't necessarily see as just general hobby enthusiasts, right? But I'm seeing them. And irrespective of whether I see them at a financial service institution, which is a large bank or insurance company around the world, right? Very large banks, it still translates to what PSA is trying to do, right? It doesn't matter whether you're a goods and services or a goods industry or a service industry, right? You need to have appropriate level of controls in place. You need to have appropriate level of review rules in place to make sure mistakes don't happen. The mistakes they're making are incredibly basic, which tells me that their services and their policies are insufficient. They're not good enough, and they need to be doing better. So please let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Thanks for watching. And as always, I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.